Silence, the kind of silence that isn't absence but presence. The hall of our chapel wakes up with old stained glass windows, filtering a pale light, and the lilies, always them, give the air a sickening sweetness. I've been a funeral director for over 2 decades, and I'd say I've seen it all. But there are things that don't belong in the everything category, and none of them are in the contract. They appear in the cracks, in the intervals, in the seconds before the goodbye. Today I will talk about the photo. If you've ever attended a wake, you know there's always a moment when someone asks to record the farewell. A photo of the family around, a portrait of the last goodbye, a gesture of, "I was here." Some condemn it, others accept it, but I've learned to respect it. Photography is just another way of holding on to what is slipping through your fingers. That morning, the Carter family arrived promptly. Sudden losses bring a kind of discipline. Those who didn't have time to prepare try to control with schedules. John Carter, 54, truck driver. A simple accident, they said. The kind of accident where the word simple stings even more. Preparing John's body was one of those silent rituals that become personal, even when you maintain distance. I always say the deceased's name, as if the whole room needs to hear that there is a someone there, not a something. The widow, Marianne, brought a photo frame for the altar. John at a summer barbecue, laughing, beer held high, niece in his lap. The daughter, Emily, 16, didn't cry. She kept her hands in her coat pockets, eyes fixed on a point between the flowers and the glass. The brother, Paul, wanted a decent photo of the farewell, for the family out of town, he said. The phrase hit me with the naturalness of someone who doesn't realize they're pushing open an old door. I don't usually interfere, but I asked, as I always do, that they avoid photos too close to the face, respect the soft light, and be careful with the reflection in the glass. Light, when it encounters loss, plays tricks no one asked for. The first click happened mid-morning when the hall was full. A photo of the widow with her hand on the coffin, the uncle in the background, the daughter to the left, the brother to the right. The sound of the shutter was louder than it should have been. Someone commented, "May God keep us," and I felt that short shiver. Not the one from fear, but from the memory of the body, as if the room had remembered something I didn't know. The second click came at the end. Empty chapel, open window, curtain moving like breath. It was then that the brother called me. "Can we take that final photo?" The final photo is what they call it when the chairs have been stacked and silence begins its work again. I said yes. I stepped back a few steps, gave space. I pointed to the spot where the light fell evenly, and then Paul said, "Can you too? I think your hand is steadier." I've spent years avoiding holding cameras in these moments, not out of superstition, out of respect. But that day I accepted. I framed it. Widow, daughter, brother. The coffin ahead, lilies to the right, the cross in the background. I breathed, and with the care of someone holding a word about to break, I shot twice. The echo of the click blended with the sound of the chapel's clock, which at that moment marked 12:13. I only realized later. No one saw anything there because nothing was there to be seen by the naked eye. The daughter, who rarely spoke, simply approached the coffin, as if needing to say something to her father in the language of hands. And I, who always leave the hall last, turned off the lights one by one, as if closing a chapter, knowing it will be read again in the early morning. Hours later, when I received the images in my email, I reviewed them out of respect for possible light corrections, for politeness. I opened the first one. The framing was correct. The pain, dignified. The presence, intact. I opened the second. The heart missed a beat for a moment. There was another face. In the left corner, behind Emily's shoulder, reflected in the glass of the notice board that hangs on the side wall, there was a fourth profile, a face that didn't belong to anyone who had been inside that day, someone looking directly at the lens without being anywhere in the room. It wasn't a stain, it wasn't a flare, it wasn't a trick of the light. I know what light does. I've spent half my life caring for what light reveals and delivers when no one asked for it. That was a face that no one knew. If you're listening to me and think these things are imagination, I understand. I thought so too. But before you decide, come with me until the end. Maybe you'll discover, as I did, that some photographs don't capture the scene, they capture the interval. The funeral home where I work was built in 1894. Before that, there was a wooden house, and before the house, a smaller chapel, and according to the records I found in the basement, a small stable for stagecoach stops. Places accumulate layers. Our chapel has stained glass windows that at noon paint the floor in absurd colors for a mourning environment. The walls hold moisture in the winter and dust in July. And the clock in the room, the same one that marked 12:13, was my grandfather's, who used to say that stop time is mourning that hasn't learned to pass. That week, the Carter family occupied more than just chairs. They occupied the air. There are losses that teach the room how to speak. John's body arrived on a windy morning. Preparing it was simple in what the technique calls simple, and complex in what the heart calls impossible. There was no visible tragedy, and that hurts differently. The face seemed like an apology that was never made. I did what I do, cleaned, adjusted, reconstructed what was necessary so the wife could recognize him and the daughter could believe. And I spoke to him. John Carter, you'll be cared for, as if I knew you. The widow thanked me 3 times during the vigil, the first formally. The second empty, someone who thanks automatically to avoid collapsing. The third, when the hall was almost just ours, with 2 neighbors and the brother guarding the door. You don't know what this means, she said, and I answered as I always do. I really don't know, I can only respect. Emily, the daughter, was 2 steps from me when she looked up and asked, Can I be alone for a bit? It was only then I noticed her hands were trembling not from the tears that didn't come, but from a contained rage, a cry that had nowhere to go. The brother nodded. We all left. In the corridor, there are old black and white photographs of wakes from other decades, when bodies were still received at home, when children wore black over uniforms, when men held hats by the brim, not the edge. The 1931 photo shows a family in a semicircle, behind them an oval mirror. I'd never noticed, that day I did, an indistinct figure in the mirror, which didn't fit anyone's position logic. Maybe a lab error, maybe a trace of silver. Or maybe it had always been there, waiting for someone to look with the eyes that night provides. The Carter photo, the final goodbye one, was taken at the same spot where the lights hit the glass head-on, which usually avoids unwanted reflections. I'd never seen a face reflected in that acrylic board of the notice board. Never. And that image didn't show a blur but features. A marked cheekbone, a high hairline, a sparse beard cut, a closed mouth as if holding a secret between the teeth. Have you ever felt that something that shouldn't be there insists on staying? I lowered the image, zoomed in, noted the time and minute, 12:13. I zoomed in further. The pixel holds truths for a while, until it turns into color squares that no longer say anything. I stopped before that. There was a shoulder outline, as if the person were positioned behind Emily, where there was no space for anyone. I mentally reviewed the hall. There, to the left of where you look, is the corridor leading to the flower storage. Closed door. In front, the wall. To the right, the altar. No angle for a body, only for a reflection. But reflection of what, if there was no body? My first impulse was to dismiss it. I threw the image into a software for artifact verification. I analyzed compression, light curves, exposure levels. I don't like easy explanations. My job isn't to prove the supernatural, it's to protect dignity. The analysis returned something between probable reflection of unidentified origin and artifact of light overlay. I laughed to myself. Long names are sometimes just new clothes for old shadows. In the late afternoon, Paul returned to pick up a forgotten item. Can I? He said, pointing to the already reorganized hall. Of course. He walked in and stopped halfway, as if a thought had tripped him. You know the photo? I was going to say I was reviewing it when he interrupted me. My mom swears she saw my great-grandfather in that picture, says she recognizes the forehead line, but he died before I was born. He left an envelope on the counter. There's a photo of him inside. If it's nonsense, just let me know. I opened the envelope after Paul left. The old sepia photograph showed a man in the doorway of a wooden door. 1919 scrawled on the back. The forehead line, the cheekbone, the sparse beard cut. Like any perfect coincidence, it insulted me for a few seconds. I closed my eyes to regain the practicality that saves me, but my stomach signaled what my head didn't want. The resemblance wasn't superficial. At night, I sat in the office, the personal light on, the phone turned down, the clock without hands in view, the 1919 photo to the left, the farewell photo to the right. I zoomed in, stepped back, aligned the angles. I looked for differences. I found them, but I found too many similarities. I could, right then, decide it was an illusion. I could close the Carter folder and sleep. But you know the what if. It's a form of breathing that doesn't accept a pillow. What if it was more than a coincidence? What if it was, somehow, a request? I stayed up all night with two photos that don't converse but listen to each other. There are patterns that form on their own when the body tires. The mind tries to fill what logic empties. I promised myself neutrality. I woke up with a decision. Speak to Marianne. There are questions only intimates can answer without us invading. The phone rang 4 times. Yes? Her voice was that of someone who hasn't fully returned to this side yet. I explained carefully. Not about a strange face, not about the great-grandfather. I said, there's an anomaly in the image. It could be light, it could be a reflection, but before I send the copies, I'd like to make sure no one was cut from the frame. Silence. Did Emily say anything? I asked. She hasn't spoken since yesterday afternoon, Marianne answered. She took the printed photo from the counter and took it to her room. She was looking at it in the mirror. I knocked on her door at 2 a.m. She said, Mom, he's standing behind me. I feel him. And I didn't have the courage to ask who. There are things we hear and, in the same moment, know we've stepped into a territory where every word weighs. I asked permission to speak to Emily. The call lasted 40 seconds. I said, Emily, you know me. I helped take care of your dad. She said, I know. I asked, who do you think the man in the photo is? She answered, the one who always shows up when someone leaves. I didn't have the courage to ask her to explain. The call dropped. I returned to the chapel before opening the doors for the next ceremony. Clocks make noise when no one is around. It's the sound of the house reminding itself that it exists. I crossed the empty hall, went to the notice board, wiped it down as I do every morning. The acrylic returned my face with the same honesty as always. But for a second, and no more than that, the line of my own hair moved as if another line were underneath, a delayed layer, an outline that didn't belong to me. I blinked. It was me again. The mind tires. In the basement, where we store files and materials that the house will use one day, I found my father's boxes. My father kept what his life couldn't resolve: fishing magazines, standard blades, notebooks. In one of them, black cover, hurried letters, Reflections. The dates ranged from 1979 to 1998. I flipped through it. Chapel mirror, figure in the background during Mr. Almeida's wake, 12:13. Further on, Walker family photo, face on side glass, 12:13. Another, asked them to avoid photos with glass at noon. No one understood. Neither did I. My eyes fell on a pattern that predates my life, giving the feeling that my body is just a chapter. I took the notebook with me. There are family sins that are just habits with surnames. I decided to check each of those dates. The rational part of me sought coincidences, stronger light times, reflections from outside traffic, car windows. I took measurements with a lux meter, simulations with aluminum foil, sealed the gaps. At certain times, light can produce faces by combining arrangement contours plus carpentry shadows. But 12:13, the hands don't create silhouettes, and my father knew enough not to confuse a shadow with a face. In the late afternoon, Paul came back unannounced. He brought a blue album, worn at the edges. My mum said that when my grandmother was buried, someone took a Polaroid of the farewell. She hated the idea, but kept it anyway. He opened it to the middle. The room, smaller, painted in a color that today would sound inappropriate. People in old clothes, red noses, handkerchief in hand. In the background, an oval mirror, like the one in the 1931 photo on our wall, and again, an outline that didn't match anyone. They said it was the great-grandfather, that he came to pick her up. Paul smiled in a way that had no joy, only surrender. "Do you believe this?" he asked me, with no irony. I answered with the only honesty possible. "I believe in what families see when pain and love look in the same direction." He nodded. "My mom will want the photo with or without the man. Can you just not mention it?" I said my job is to give the family what they can carry. When he left another question, smaller but heavier. "If you figure out who it is, will you tell me?" At night, the old house creaked. There was the creak of wood, the creak of cold, the creak of the body remembering gravity. I sat with my father's notebook for the last time. There are entries that never get answered, but the question improves with time. He wrote in 1986, "If there's a hallway guardian, may he forgive me when I enter with heavy shoes." I closed the notebook like closing a prayer. The weeks that followed brought other wakes. Life, that rope with knots, keeps pulling. The Carter story stayed there, between the folders and the arrangements, until one rainy early morning, I had to go down again to the chapel, called by an alarm that insisted on shouting, "Door ajar." It was 12:11 when I stepped into the corridor. Sometimes the world seems to like precise coordinates to teach us. The main chapel door, a crack. The wind pushes because it wants to be blamed, but the doorknob was cold inside. I entered, turned on the side light, the one that doesn't interfere with the stained glass clarity. The empty hall has its own sound. It's the sound of what shouldn't echo, but does. I walked slowly, past the row of benches, reached the pulpit. The notice board, which always returns my face, the one that reminds me who I am, this time returned an emptiness. Not mine, the reflections. I didn't see anyone, yet I felt someone's position. There are presences that the mind maps like furniture. You know where they are even in the dark. The position was 2 steps behind me, to the left. The clock, high up, which hasn't marked 12:13 since I turned it backward, announced in my body's memory that it was time. I didn't move. "Hiram," I said. The name fills the mouth dryly. "I don't know if you're him, or if you're the face the family gave you to get through. I just know you're being seen. And if there's anything I need to adjust, tell me." Silence. Not the one before. A new silence, one that opens space and doesn't close doors. I breathed more slowly. Somewhere in the chapel, a drop fell, not from the ceiling, but from time. And then without light, without wind, without trick, the notice board returned for a second, the outline of a shoulder that wasn't mine. A second long enough for me to never again call it coincidence. It didn't frighten. It didn't demand. It didn't ask permission. It was just a confirmation. I see you, and by seeing, I learned to stay in my place. The alarm that brought me there was just a contact that failed. I closed the door, checked the latch twice, climbed the stairs. Before reaching the last step, I turned my face toward the corridor, a habit of someone who got used to checking what they left behind. From the end of the corridor, the chapel's glass seemed like an eye, and for a moment, a grayish gleam crossed from inside to outside. I stayed there, listening to my heart, until it accepted once more the politeness of the chest. The next morning, I received a message from an unknown number. "Thank you for leaving the whole photo." My mom smiled for the first time. Signature Emily. I didn't reply. Replying is sometimes calling, and there are thank yous that are returned by staying silent. The Carter photos were printed, delivered, and stored. No one else wrote to me about them. The weeks rearranged the hours, but every once